In today's video, I want to talk about my experience with demons. It feels very strange to create this video because demons can feel like something way out there. What are you talking about? This is really spooky. Are you okay? Do you need medication? Yet I feel like that's kind of sad because I feel like there is definitely the human experience, this living in the moment. How can you live your best life now? It's almost as though we're so focused on making this life, our human life, the best life now. But then what happens after your soul leaves the body? What if there are choices we're making in this experience that affect our experience for eternity with our souls, the spiritual realm? There's so many people who have experienced it. So I'll share a little bit about my experience. So sorry about the sound. I'm recording and this just happens to be so much sound when I'm trying to get this message. It's almost as though something doesn't want me to get this message out there, but I am committed and it's going to happen. For a bit of context, I grew up in a very, very Christian family. My mom is a follower and believer of Jesus. So was my auntie. And when I lived with my grandmother, every day, the entire family, we would surround her bed and we would make prayers for the community, for the family, and we would just pray that Jesus Christ and God would protect them and heal them and really just bless them. Now things began to change when I went into my adulthood and I started getting more curious. I went to university and I thought, I'm gonna live my best life now. I'm not gonna follow my mom's advice about the world. And this feels fun, this feels good, this feels amazing. Oh my God, I am living my best life now. And when you live in London, and even when you just go to university, you meet people of different faiths, from different countries, with different viewpoints, different perspectives. And the more people I would talk to, the more curious I would be, and I would start to be much more flexible in my beliefs. What I didn't realize, however, was that there were things that I was doing that was actually taking me away from God, to the point that I actually began praying to another God. I had this really great job, and in this new job, I really wanted to do well in this job, but it was a step up in my career. There was a lot that I didn't know, and I had heard that if you pray to this God will give you knowledge, and this God will guide you. And so I would make prayers that such as like, speak through me, guide me, please help me see what I need to do. It ended up being a daily thing. And I started to see results. Like I would get guidance. I would start to have thoughts that would come up, and these thoughts would actually play out, and the business would do really, really well. And it was making a bigger impact. Now, this was before I got married. And then my life started to kind of turn upside down after I got married. Now, this is a question that I invite you to consider: is when you're praying, do you know, really know what you're praying to? Do you really know what you're inviting into your life? Because at the time, I thought that every thought that you hear, if you're praying to God, it's from God. But it's actually possible that the thoughts and the ideas and the things that you're hearing, the things that are inspiring you to make certain choices in your life, it's possible that what's inspiring you isn't actually God, but is actually something else. And once you start delving into what else could it be? Is it Satan, or are Christians just being dramatic and making up whether heaven and hell exist? And, is it possible that heaven and hell doesn't even exist? Like, what are all these lies? They're trying to make me fearful. They're trying to make me scared, and I don't like that, and I'm against that, and all that sort of stuff. And that's kind of what I was really starting to absorb. And I started to lose my faith in Jesus Christ, in God, until I actually had an actual experience with a demon. A few years ago, in 2017, I was diagnosed with a tumor. Now, what's really interesting is that how the tumor came about is extremely bizarre. The tumor that I had is very, very uncommon. My surgeon was saying that there's a 1 in a million probability of you getting a tumor like this. It's like a freak accident. This tumor was growing inside me, and it grew to the point that it was pressing on my major blood vessels. So one day I was running and I couldn't see through one eye. And I thought, this is weird. I suddenly went somewhat blind in one eye, and it gave me symptoms that were kind of similar to a stroke. The next day, when I woke up in the morning, I had severe chest pains. I was struggling to breathe. The left side of my face just became droopy. So I went to hospital, I got checked out, and they were like, this makes no sense. And every time I would go to doctors would tell me that there was nothing wrong with me. They'd run tests. The tests never showed anything. After getting turned away by the cardiologist who was looking at my heart, I just thought, okay, they say nothing's wrong with my heart. It's all just a mystery. And then later that day, I ended up getting a phone call from the cardiologist saying, I'm so sorry. I've actually made a mistake. I had printed out all the scans of your heart, and when I looked at the scans on my computer, I couldn't see a mass. But when I printed it out and I enlarged the scan, I could actually see a mass that looks like on your liver. And that ended up leading to investigations, which eventually found my tumor. And I found my surgeon, and my surgeon said that I needed to be operated on because the reason why I was having difficulty breathing was because it was pressing on my major blood vessels. And if it kept on growing, I would either die from it blocking my major blood vessels, or from it actually turning into a malignant and aggressive form of pancreatic cancer. Now, prior to me having the surgery, the night before, I was praying, and I had this vision of my grandmother, like I mentioned, who was very much a godly woman. I had this vision that her soul would somehow, her spirit would somehow be with my surgeon on the day, and that she would speak to him and she would guide him and she would actually move his hands. So when I had this dream, I thought, okay, I'll be safe, I'll be okay. When I had my surgery, my surgeon was saying that when he opened me up, he literally looked at my tumor and thought, we can't take this out. It was so big and it was entangled in my major blood vessels to the point that if you aren't careful with how you take out the tumor, so the tumor was like the size of a man's fist. If you're trying to take out something the size of a grown man's fist and it's entangled in the blood vessels, any wrong move and you tear the major blood vessels and then you're gone. So he was opening me up, and even though he knew that in order for me to survive, he needed to take the tumor out, he couldn't see a way to take the tumor out. My surgeon was saying that after he had told his colleagues that he was going to close me up, he suddenly just had this idea, this voice telling him that maybe you should try moving the tumor this way and trying to see if there is a way that you can prick it, and if there's like any liquid, because my tumor was mainly solid, but it had parts of it that were liquid. So he thought, if I can just take out the parts that are liquid, it might reduce the size of the tumor just a little bit so that he can maneuver it out. And this thought, he ended up following through with it, and it ended up working, and he ended up being able to take out the tumor, and the whole thing was a miracle, almost like by the grace of God. So that was one thing. I had my surgery, and this surgery is invasive. They removed my bile duct, they removed my duodenum, they removed the tumor, they removed part of my pancreas, they removed my gallbladder, and then they essentially stitch you back up with missing organs, but somehow your body is able to digest food. But then this is when I really started to experience things myself. When I'm in the recovery, I'm on extreme amounts of medication that is there to help minimize the pain. Now, I'd had nightmares, which can happen because your body's trying to process what happened. But I had this different experience. I started to drift off. It was a really surreal experience. It was like my soul was leaving my body and going to another reality. Even though like I was nodding off, and as I was nodding off, I would suddenly feel my soul leave my body, and I would enter a different reality. Now, at first I thought this was a dream, that this was just a dream like some of my other nightmares that I'd had after my surgery. And when I landed in this area, it was just gray, cloudy, dark, kind of like if there was like an apocalypse. It was a city, but the city was empty. There were shops and there was nobody there. So there are lamps, but the lamps, they don't turn on. And I remember being like, where am I? Like, why am I here? And I remember feeling so alone, feeling a little bit cold. And as I was walking, I was looking for someone. I was like, hello, hello, anybody there? And I was looking and I would just see the clouds, and the clouds were dark and gray. There was no rain. It was just darkness and a little bit of light, but there was a lot of darkness there too. And then all of a sudden I see an uncle. I won't say his name. Let me just call him Sam. All of a sudden I see Sam. In real life, Sam is dead. Sam died quite a few years ago. So I see Sam and I'm like, Sam, what are you doing here? Wow, like, it's great to see you. And he's just looking at me at complete shock and disbelief. He just says, what are you doing here? And I was like, I don't know, what are you doing here? Great to see you. And I'm trying to hug him, and he's actually looking really shocked that I'm in this world. So I say to him, where are these other people? Like, where are the rest of my relatives? Where are they? I want to see them all. And he was like, they're not here. I was like, well, what do you mean they're not here? And he said to me, your grandmother and your other uncle. So I have one uncle who died very young when he was, I think, 25. And both of them were believed in Jesus and believed in God. And he said, they're together, but they're looking for you. And I was like, oh, okay, well, all right. But no one that I knew in my real, like, earthly experience, no one that I knew in the earthly experience was there. He didn't mention them. It was almost as though they weren't in the spiritual realm because they were in the human earthly realm. They were in that world and not in the spiritual world. He says, they're looking for you. You need to find them. So I'm like, okay, I'll look for them. Now, as I'm walking, all of a sudden, there is this invisible force, kind of like a tornado or a hurricane, and it's coming towards me. And all of a sudden, this spirit just comes towards me, but it's somewhat it's visible but invisible in the sense that it wasn't like a human, it wasn't like an animal, it wasn't like a beast. It was like this formless spirit that was moving through air, and it would pick me up really, really high in the sky, and then all of a sudden it would chuck me right back down onto the ground, and it would pick me up and then chuck me right back onto the ground. As I was doing this, it was like I was experiencing this in real life. Like, I was feeling the pain, my bones breaking. I was feeling it all whilst still simultaneously sleeping in my earthly experience. For the few days after my surgery, I wasn't actually able to remember anything. So for example, my cousin, she came out as a lesbian during that time. This is major news in a family, particularly if you're in a Christian family. The point is that during that time, I had no memory, no recollection of any of that happening. The only thing that I recall, that's the only place that my soul really was, and the earthly experience, it was nothing. It's like I wasn't even there. And it was like a nightmare that wouldn't stop. So I would be terrified and I'd pray to God, God, please help me. God, please help me. God, please help me. And then somehow I would, like literally, it's like a sucking back. I would shoot back into my human body. And when I would shoot back into my human body, my body would literally like jerk up, and then I'd wake up, and then I'd see my husband and my mother at the hospital, and they were just there talking like normal. And I would just be like, this is really strange. And then as soon as I would close my eyes again and drift back, I'd go right back to this kind of spiritual experience. And this thing was breaking me, and it was literally throwing me against things. It was like I had this other thing, this other light, but it wasn't like the light was outside. It wasn't like there were two forces or two spirits that were fighting together. It was more like I had a light that was inside me, like a rod. Imagine like a real thick steel rod, and this thick steel rod was inside me, and there was this other force that was trying to break the steel rod, because once it could break the steel rod, then my soul, it would be able to take my soul. This was going on for a few days. So I'm running out of energy because I'm running and I'm running and I'm running. I'm running into buildings, these empty buildings, and it's following me up the stairs. I'm opening houses. I'm going wherever I can, trying to hide from this spirit thing, and it always finds me. And every time it picks me up, it throws me against chest of drawers, against walls. I'm thrown against the ceiling. I'm falling and I'm bleeding. I'm breaking things. I'm breaking like my body parts. And yet somehow, I'm able to stand up. And the more I stand up, the more this evil thing gets angry because it's trying to break me. Then it starts speaking to me saying,
I want your soul. Give me your soul.
And that's when I started to be so afraid. And I would say, I am so scared. I am so scared. I am so scared. I'm running out of energy. I can't hold on. I can't hold on. Because enduring this trial was extremely difficult. And then I remember hearing another voice saying,
Believe in God and it won't take your soul. If you lose faith in me, it will take your soul.
And so long as I believed that, it was like I was unbreakable by this evil thing. Now, eventually what ended up happening, as I was at my wit's end, I would somehow speak into my earthly experience. I can't do this anymore. I was speaking out loud when I was actually speaking in this spiritual realm. And my mom was there. And like I said, my mom believes in Jesus Christ so strongly. So she started praying, and she was praying so intensely. She was speaking that out. She was calling that out. She was getting rid of it. And she was telling Jesus to heal me, saying that Jesus was with me. She was praying God like so strongly, and then all of a sudden, like that, it disappeared, and I was just sucked back into the human real experience, and it was gone. And it wasn't until after that my healing turned, and I actually started to heal, and I actually started to get better. But before that point, all I was experiencing worse pain and worse pain and worse pain. And spiritually, I didn't have the strength. I was losing the strength and the will to live. And that was really my first experience, is experiencing the spiritual realm. And I guess the reason that I share this story is to say that if you have ever believed in God or believed in Jesus Christ, and you've heard about the armor of the Holy Spirit, I feel like that was my first experience of actually realizing that armor of the Holy Spirit is real. And it's almost as though your spirit can't be broken so long as you wear the Holy Spirit. After this experience, even though I healed, it was almost as though there was this evil nature that just wouldn't give up. And at the time, my husband didn't really believe in Jesus Christ or God. And my husband and I, we've had like this bad luck, like the probabilities of things happening was just really unlikely, like the tumor, extremely unlikely for the tumor to happen. Then we go on a honeymoon, and Hurricane Irma was coming, and we had to leave the location because a hurricane comes to the honeymoon. Even with my pregnancy, even with the baby, I ended up having to have an emergency surgery when I was 18 weeks pregnant. When I had my obstruction and I was dying, there were so many things that were in play that would have meant that I would die. The doctor that I was assigned had said to me that he wasn't going to operate on me for another day. And it had only been that a new doctor who came to work on that shift, who wasn't supposed to be working that day, because that wasn't his normal working day, he happened to come in and he saw me. I was one of the first people he saw. And the minute he saw me and he looked at my test results and he looked at everything, he thought, holy moly, who was looking after this woman? Because whoever was looking after this woman, by the next day, I would have been dead. And he just came in just out of nowhere. He wasn't even supposed to be working. It was like a fluke. And my mom had been praying to God and to Jesus Christ. She'd been praying that someone helps end my pain, because I was in so much pain. And this is when I was 18 weeks pregnant. And he was like, you need the surgery. We don't have time to talk about it. You need the surgery now. I had the surgery, and he's a Catholic. I had the surgery, and he was able to remove the obstruction. He was able to help me recover, and he was able to save the baby, and I've had my daughter. And I remember him looking at me after I'd recovered. 6 weeks later, I had to go see him. And he looked at me and he said that he thanks God so much. He didn't even know my faith. He said to me, I thank God so much that I had been assigned to see that day, because the other doctors would not have operated on you. They believed that you had more time, and they just couldn't see what I could see. And when he shared my case with people that were at other hospitals, people that were more senior with that experience, when he shared my case with them, he said that they had all came to the same conclusion, which was that because of the acid and everything that was in my body, I would have died. I would have lost my daughter within 12 hours, and I would have died within 24 hours. All of them agreed that. But no one at the hospital that I was at saw that. No one at the hospital saw that, apart from this one guy who believed in God and who was Catholic. And he just said that these are the times when he is a doctor, he just thinks that, he said that my case will be one of the cases that he'll remember for the rest of his life, because he doesn't know what happened, but it was like there was an intervention. It was like there was always something that was constantly trying to get at my soul or my marriage. And I just had this experience at my house, where in my apartment, where I said to my mom, I think there's something here. I was seeing something living. It was like a shadow, not an actual being, but like a shadow. And I would see the shadow just hanging around, and I was like, what on earth is this? It would hang around my husband, it would move into my husband. And one time I was laying in bed and I was sleeping, and my body actually was getting lifted. It was getting lifted from the bed. Imagine this is the bed and this is my body, and my body was getting lifted like this. So imagine that's like my chest, kind of like my lower abdomen area. What on earth is that? And so I called my mom and I said, Mom, I think there's a spirit. There's some sort of curse. There's something here. So I prayed with my mom, and my mom came over and she consulted with like this Catholic minister, and she got advice on how to get rid of evil spirits in a house. She came over and she started following this recommendation by this minister. She had holy water, she had salt, and she was just like sprinkling holy water and salt just everywhere, just sprinkling it everywhere, just and she just started speaking all these words and saying all these things, and I had no idea what she was talking about, and she was doing it all over my head, and she was doing all of this. And then she was saying, you do not belong here. This is not your home. This is the home of, and then she started saying our names. This is not your home. Get out. You do not belong here. This is a home for Jesus Christ. This is a home for Jesus Christ. And then all of a sudden, after my mom left, we never saw that spirit ever again, ever. Like that dark energy, those shadows, gone. And since that moment, I haven't had any experiences like that. I mean, sure, my daughter was born after that, and that experience was what it was. But when my daughter was coming prematurely, the baby was progressing. The baby was being born prematurely. It looked like I was in labor. And then my mom comes in, she walks in, she puts her hand on my stomach, and she speaks to my child. And she basically says to my child, you're not coming now. Jesus, this child needs to stay here longer to stay healthy. And then all of a sudden, my labor stopped progressing. Like it literally just stopped progressing. And so I was actually able to carry my child to term because of that.
One of the things that I forgot to mention was that when my daughter was born, after everything that I went through with the pregnancy, the surgery, the threatened preterm labor, and some other issues, when she was born, I had an emergency C-section. But when she was born, she wasn't breathing. She didn't breathe for over 5 minutes. There was the red light in the C-section room, and there was a ton of people surrounding my child, and I couldn't see her. But they were just saying, stay calm, she'll scream anytime soon. And I was listening to music, and I realized that I had been able to listen to 2 songs, and I still hadn't heard my child cry. I thought, now that is weird. And so I started to get worried, and I asked my husband, what's wrong? Why isn't she crying? And he said that he didn't know, he couldn't see, but that he was sure everything was fine. And that's when I started to worry that no one was giving me any answers as to why a few minutes had gone by and we hadn't heard her cry. And so as a tear went down my left eye, I remember my heart just sinking and me thinking, like, no way, like, I can't have gone through everything that I've been through and then have a stillbirth when I had just reached full term. Like, I was 38 weeks pregnant, and making it to full term, given everything that I'd been through, it was like, that was my big goal. And it would have terrified me to have reached 38 weeks after everything and to have lost her. So I remember the experience that I had during my after my surgery, which was that you lose if you lose faith in God. So I remember thinking, don't doubt God, don't think God is failing you. So I just simply said one line in my head, which was, God, you did not bring me this far to abandon me. I still have faith in you. You did not bring me this far to abandon me. And then literally within a couple seconds, she had her first cry. I couldn't hear it because it was so quiet and so faint, but she had her first cry. And doctors thought that something was wrong with her because she hadn't cried for so long, and she was blue and she was limp and she was pretty non-responsive, and they thought something was wrong. And then all of a sudden she was fighting, and they thought maybe she had epilepsy or she had some brain issues or whatever. So she was in an ICU for a few days, and they ran all these tests, and they realized that actually my child was perfectly healthy, and they have no explanation for what happened and how she turned out perfectly healthy. They have no explanation for that. It was just a sheer inexplainable experience for them, that they said that it rarely happens. Something like that rarely happens, and even her recovery was unexplained. So that was that experience too.
And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I've had my own experiences with this, and I guess a question that I want you to think about is, which God are you praying to? Because which God you're praying to can actually influence what actually happens, not only in your earthly experience, but also what happens to your soul afterwards. Now, I had been tied to the Christian faith because of my family roots, and even though I explored and I went to other things, I always ended up going back to Jesus Christ, and I always ended up going back to God. And in this case, that's actually what saved me. That's actually what saved me. And so I just wanted to share that story, and just hope that when you're praying, when you're going to God, to always be mindful of what are you praying to, what are you inviting into your life, and really ask yourself, is what you're praying to really what you think it is? Because if I had known that praying to these other gods and the other faiths that I was exploring, if I had known that that would have opened me to this whole other world, I wouldn't have made that choice. So yeah, anyways, that's it from this week's video. I would love to know, have you had any experiences where you felt saved by God, or maybe whether you've doubted Jesus Christ or God? Let me know. Or is this whole thing a bit spooky and weird to you? Just let me know what your thoughts are. Anyways, I'll speak to you soon. All right, bye.